Bromsgrove and Alvechurch for a police investigation, and the M4 in Berkshire is down to a single lane London bound at junction 5. The Langley turn off. Emergency repair works are underway. Long queues back to junction 6 at Slough. The M11 is down to a single lane southbound in Essex just before 7. The Harlow exit recovery work and emergency repairs are underway after a van caught fire. On the Essex stretch of the M25, 2 lanes are closed anti-clockwise. Emergency repairs are underway just after the M11. And in Hampshire on the M27 eastbound, a lane shut from junction 5 to 7 heading away from Southampton after a car broke down. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Imagine getting a call to tell you that you've won £50,000 in tax-free cash, our biggest cash prize of the year.
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
Oh, in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co. Coming up tonight regarding the situation in Syria. Donald Trump has come out and said, and I quote, "The USA should have nothing to do with it. It isn't our fight. Let it play out and do not get involved." That's his words, but are they wise words, and should our government have the same attitude here? Also coming up tonight, the Labour government is now seeking some creative minds. Take a listen.
The message to creative thinkers is, this is your chance to serve your country.
Are you a creative mind? Are you entrepreneurial? Would you then do your duty and help shake up the government? £100 million fund to launch public service reform. What do you think? The right approach or not? And a report out today says that 45% of people don't trust the government, whoever they are, to put our nation's interest first. The same report also says that the UK is almost as divided between left and right as America, and extremism is on the rise. So much to unpack there. And joining me tonight, what a panel for you, ladies and gents. I've got M&M, Mark Goodwin, the pollster and academic, and Matt Larser, the former Labour advisor. But before we get stuck in, let's cross live for your 6 o'clock news headlines.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wensler with your headlines from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister has said Britain and its allies must be intensely focused on the transition to a new regime in Syria amid fears of a resurgence of the Islamic State. It comes as the UK has paused all Syrian asylum claims. It follows France, Germany and Austria saying they would pause decisions on asylum requests from Syrian citizens until the political situation in the Middle East country becomes clearer. Speaking moments ago, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper confirmed the UK would be assessing the situation.
That the situation in Syria is moving extremely fast after the fall of the Assad regime. We have seen some people returning to Syria, but we also have a very fast-moving situation that we need to closely monitor. And that is why, like Germany, like France and like other countries, we have paused asylum decisions on cases from Syria while the Home Office reviews and monitors the current situation.
Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer is facing criticism for putting efforts to kickstart economic growth above human rights concerns as he meets Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Downing Street said the economy was Sir Keir's #1 priority, but insists he would still raise concerns about the Saudi government's human rights record. Campaigners are urging the Prime Minister to speak out on the cases of child defendants facing the death penalty and the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Edinburgh City Council leader Cammy Day has resigned from his post following reports he sent Ukrainian refugees messages asking about their sexual preferences. The Labour politician had already been suspended by his party as police investigate a complaint against him of inappropriate behaviour. The Sunday Mail reported he sent unsolicited messages to Ukrainian refugees who said they felt unable to rebuff him. In other news, a 15-year-old girl was stabbed to death while standing up for a friend who had wanted to get back her teddy bear from her ex-boyfriend. A court heard how 18-year-old Hassan Sentamu lashed out at Eliane Andam with a kitchen knife in a fit of white-hot anger in Croydon town centre. Sentamu, who was 17 years old at the time, has admitted manslaughter but denied Eliane's murder, claiming a loss of control because he has autism. And Premier League referee David Coote has been sacked after an investigation into his conduct. Professional Game Match Officials Limited made the statement after a video emerged last month of 42-year-old Coote appearing to make derogatory remarks about Liverpool and their former manager, Jurgen Klopp. And Donald Trump has said the King is fighting very hard as the monarch continues to receive cancer treatment. It comes after the US President-elect met the Prince of Wales in Paris following the ceremonial reopening of Notre Dame Cathedral on Saturday. Mr. Trump told the New York Post that the pair discussed Charles and the Princess of Wales's health, with both being diagnosed with cancer this year. Mr. Trump revealed Princess Kate is doing well and the King is fighting very hard, adding that William loves his father and he loves his wife, so it was sad. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Michelle.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there and happy Monday to you. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. That story in the news bulletin there about that girl that was stabbed in Croydon. What is this, the new thing about stabbing people in their necks? Is it just me or does this seem to be on the increase? It's absolutely horrific. I'm following that story with interest, I can tell you that. Look, alongside me, my panel tonight, I like these two and I know that you do as well. It's my two. The M&Ms, Matt Goodwin, the pollster and academic, and also Matt Larser, former Labour advisor. But you've got Matthew written down here.
I get the posh one.
Do you? Are you? Well,
my mum used to hate being called Matt, but I don't mind. But my mum used to go crazy when he was
called Matt. But do you know what Matthew means?
Oh, what?
It means...
Is it for tea time viewing?
A gift from God.
A gift from God. So that I've got two gifts from God then. What an absolute
what an evening.
In this run-up to Christmas, not one gift from God, but two. I'll let you decide how good these gifts are. Are they good or
he set us up for a fool.
Them and give them to someone else. Get in touch with me tonight. It's not just about the two M&Ms. It is about you at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? So much, ladies and gents, that we need to discuss. Get in touch with me all the usual ways. Email me gbviews@gbnews.com. gbenews@gbenews.com. Tweet or X me or go to Your Say on the website. You can chat to me and to each other there as well. But look, of course, the big story dominating all the headlines today is, of course, Syria. What I want to do, ladies and gents, is bring it to this country here. And specifically, what I want you to tell me tonight is just how involved, if at all, you think the UK should be on this. Many people issuing statements today. Let's start by listening to David Lammy, one of the announcements that he's had to say.
Today, the Prime Minister has announced an additional £11 million of humanitarian support for Syrians. Seeing so many start to return to Syria is a positive sign for their hopes for a better future now that Assad is gone. But a lot depends on what happens now. This flow into Syria could quickly become a flow back out and potentially increase the numbers using dangerous illegal migration routes to continental Europe and the United Kingdom.
In another blank cheque, 11 million quid. I thought this country was skint, ladies and gents. Anyway, look, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, she also issuing an announcement today. Take a listen.
Know that the situation in Syria is moving extremely fast after the fall of the Assad regime. We have seen some people returning to Syria, but we also have a very fast-moving situation that we need to closely monitor. And that is why, like Germany, like France and like other countries, we have paused asylum decisions on cases from Syria while the Home Office reviews and monitors the current situation.
I have got to tell you, just before I bring in Matt Goodwin, I want to tell you what Donald Trump has had to say on the matter. So he has issued quite a lengthy tweet on this. It does say quite a lot of stuff, but the bit that interested me the most was the final couple of sentences. I can bring it up on the screen for you, where he's talking about the situation there. But he says, the United States should have nothing to do with this. It's not our fight. Let it play out. Do not get involved. Matt Goodwin, where are you on all this?
I agree with Donald Trump, actually, and I think we've been involved in forever wars for too long. I think our involvement in the Middle East and in countries from Afghanistan to Iraq has not actually made the world a better place. I think we should just stand off and see what is actually going to unfold in Syria. By the way, where on earth has this 11 million quid come from?
The magic
It's amazing.
money tree,
It's amazing, isn't it? You can take money off pensioners, you can smash family farms, but some Tin Pot dictatorship falls and suddenly there's 11 million quid for them. I think it's pretty outrageous. But I think we stand back because some of the guys who are clearly filling the vacuum in Syria, as we've seen over the last 48 hours, you know, these are not sort of, you know, hug a hoodie kind of nice, good people. These are Islamists. These are hardcore Al-Qaeda, ISIS affiliate groups. Again, why are we giving 11 million quid to...
You're talking about the likes of...
It's not going to them.
Well, hang on, let me do... We don't know who these people are. We don't know what they want. We don't know what they're going to do to people in Syria. There was a lot of optimism after the Arab Spring where everybody suddenly said, well, look, democracy's on the way, and then look at that, how that turned out. I'm actually with Trump. I think we stand back. I say end the forever wars. It's time for other people to focus on these countries, to do what they can, but it's not our job to save the world.
Matt Lazar?
Well, I don't think anybody's suggesting it is our job to save the world. That's why the Donald Trump message is quite curious, because nobody's suggesting that either Britain, other European allies or the US get involved directly. The 11 million quid is coming, I presume, from the international aid budget, and it's to go to NGOs in the region as things stabilise. Why is that of direct importance to Britain? Because that will help reduce the flow of migrants, and that's one of the, what we hope will be one of the positive things. You're absolutely right. I think we all agree that the people who've taken over an unknown quantity in their current form. In their previous form, they're obviously raised serious alarm bells. Now, they've made some good noises about protecting religious minorities, about having a functioning democracy, etc. But yes, I think we do need to wait and see before we get overly involved. Because we saw the problem in Libya in... when David Cameron, when Gaddafi fell, David Cameron and others thought they had it all sorted in Libya, and in fact we ended up with still have two governments in Libya with no government in overall charge of the country, which is one of the pushes of migration. So let's hope, but let's be cautious, but let's support humanitarian in the region.
Can I just add one thing into this, because I think it's important. I've heard some commentators in Britain this morning saying we should be welcoming Syrian refugees. I actually do not think we should be doing that. I think we should be following Germany and Austria in saying, actually, we should be encouraging the return of Syrian refugees from Europe. If people want to go home, we should facilitate that. I agree with what Germany and Austria are doing, because the blunt reality is we've had say the unsayable again. We've had too many people from Syria involved in terrorist attacks, in stabbings, in murders in Europe since the Great Migration of 2015.
So just to be clear, so France and Germany, they are pausing. They're doing the same as what we're doing essentially in the UK. So they're pausing those asylum things. There has been a suggestion from a couple of officials in Germany that you offer these people about £1,000, €1,000 if they do indeed want to go home. Austria, as Matt's saying, they are going to embark on a proactive repatriation scheme, deporting those Syrians back to the homelands. You say that this 11 million quid is going to stop people kind of moving and end kind of migration or reduce it. We, the UK, have given Syria about £4 billion since 2011. And that hasn't had the effects of stopping migration. So why is this 11 million going to do that in your mind?
Well, I think the 11 million, the reason for having the 11 million spending now is because obviously the situation is more unstable than it has been. Essentially, you've got a new government coming in. I think what you want to do immediately is make sure that people don't feel they have to leave so they can eat. I mean, one of the drivers of migration is this is going to go to NGOs, to charities, to do on-the-ground humanitarian support. I absolutely don't think we should give anything like a blank check to the new regime. We don't know what the new regime is going to be like, and we need to proceed with caution, which is why the government, like the European Union, has said that it won't take the HTS, the group that basically is providing the new government, off the list of terrorist organisations just yet. Caution first.
Do you know how many winter fuel payments 11 million pounds is?
Yeah, it's
31,000. I've just done the sums on my smartphone. 31,000 British pensioners. We could have given them the winter fuel payment for 11 million quid.
But Matt, you know, it's a massively simplistic to say that.
No, it isn't,
because it's come from the international development. So you think we shouldn't do any international development?
David Lammy has already said, remember, suddenly he's going to send £100 million, remember this from a few months ago, £100 million to foreign dictatorships, tin pot regimes to try and stop migration to Britain up source. Again, there's another 11 million, so let's say 110 million. This is bonkers.
It's coming from the international development budget, which is already there.
Then we're spending too much on international aid. Well, if we can't afford to keep pensioners warm in winter, we should slash the international aid budget.
I don't think it's one or the other. I've said before that I think that the winter fuel allowance should have been more cleverly done, in that the richest pensioners don't need it, but it shouldn't have been this hard cut-off there is people who aren't on pension credit. So I don't think the government was wrong on that, but I think the government is right to try and make sure that we, A, support the poorest people in the world, and B, we use our investment cleverly to try and stop migration, because I think everybody in Britain thinks that migration in Britain is too high after 14 years of the Tories.
I am going to go to Brit, so very brief answer on this. But obviously, we do have a finite pot of money. You say it's different pots, but it's all ultimately the same pot, which is the taxpayers' funds. When cash is so strapped, where do you think funds should be prioritised domestically to our problems here or to problems abroad?
I think problems at home come first. There's a limit to what we can do internationally, but with the money we have put aside internationally, we need to make sure we get the biggest bang for our buck and use it in the right places. And protecting people in Syria at the moment is the right place.
I need to go to a break, but every time you're saying something, it's prompting to ask another question.
Let's throw 11 million to some random Islamists that we don't know.
Question, as I'm listening to you, this all happened in Syria. Like, literally, it kicked off at a speed of light. People were very surprised by how quick this all happened. So how are we then, literally within 5 minutes, able to identify who are the right players, the kind of most effective outlets and so on and so forth in this new look Syria? How have we been able to establish that within 5 minutes to make sure that our £11 million is going to
My understanding is it's not going to anybody within the regime. It's going to existing charities, presumably people like Oxfam and UNICEF who are on the ground doing work there. It's not going to go to anybody in the government. It's to existing charities.
There you go. What do you think to all of that, what you're hearing tonight? You'll have strong opinions on that, I'm absolutely sure. There is so much coming up to discuss with you, ladies and gents. Tech entrepreneurs, creative minds. Is it time to involve them in our public services? Start up Britain, that's apparently what we need to aspire to be. Is this going to work? Is it going to save us cash or not? I'll see you in 2.
GB News News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
More mouthful of David Walliams now and what he's revealing, what he's talking about. Josh, where do you think this goes? Because there is a lot of speculation about David, who he is, what he is. Where do you think this takes us now?
Oh, I think he's an absolute sweetheart. I mean, it was such a joy to spend as much time with him as I did. And the where it takes us is simply that I think we're growing out of, I suppose, the fairly infantile idea that we might have had about gender and sexuality, especially over the past sort of 5 to 10 to 15 years, where the culture wars have gotten so hot that it's become very, very difficult to talk about any of these issues sensibly without feeling like you're going to get pilloried or attacked from either side. And so Uncomfortable Conversations is a show where we try to have those conversations sort of heedless of treading on eggshells or triggering.
And do you think, Josh, that these conversations will become less uncomfortable when you get people like Walliams talking about it and who he is and where he's going, and therefore more acceptable for other people to open up and say, I don't know who I am or what I am, but I know I'm different?
That would be my hope. Look, I'm married to a guy, so I have sort of bona fides on the gay card, and I always felt that it was somewhat of a caricature the way the gay community or lobby, so to speak, insisted on a certain way of talking, a certain way of dressing, a certain way of voting, a certain way of dancing, that you can only be a good gay if you're wearing arseless chaps and straddling a giant inflatable penis while you're going down Oxford Street during Gay Pride. You know, like, I always thought, can't we have a very big tent? And I think what David is doing here is being honest, being upfront, saying it doesn't mean I have to join a team, it doesn't mean I'm any different from the person you knew.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock. Matt Goodwin and Matt Laza remain alongside me. Lots of people want us to be a little bit more Donald Trump about our approach and response to the situation in Syria. If you've just tuned in, Donald Trump is basically saying he just wants to sit this one out. And I wonder whether or not Keir Starmer should do the same. I'm also trying to find out, because you just heard the UK is giving £11 million in aid. I'm just trying to find out which other countries have immediately announced cash. Is it just us? Are there other countries? I'm desperately trying to figure out the answer to that, because it's not currently clear. I'll keep you in the loop on that one. Andy says, how can we confound all this cash for foreign conflicts but nothing whatsoever for British pensioners? Rita says, why would we want to involve ourselves in yet another foreign conflict? David, it says, it would have made a refreshing change if the Foreign Secretary just announced instead that it was going to be 11 million to the pensioners of Britain. There's a theme coming through from the viewers here, David. I've got to tell you, I don't see that happening, though, anytime soon. Lots of people saying, essentially, Michelle, charity has to begin at home. Keep your thoughts coming in. Look, we all talked, don't we, about what's going on in the States, for example, the likes of Elon Musk and that kind of business that's all been set up, not a business, but the department that's just been set up for government efficiency. Well, look, we might have our very own here in the UK. Take a listen to this.
We do want innovators and disruptors and original thinkers. And my message to creative thinkers is, this is your chance to serve your country. Use your brain power, your technological talents to fix some of the biggest problems we face today. Britain needs you.
Britain needs you, ladies and gents. That's Pat McFadden there. Are you sitting on the edge of your sofa saying, that sounds like me, Michelle? Well, if so, it's the Innovation Fellowship Programme. You can take a secondment for between 6 months to a year. You'll be paid a salary of up to £85,000 a year. We've previously had Dominic Cummings calling for weirdos and misfits to help shake things up. His words, not mine. Is this the right approach then from this government, Matt?
So I don't disagree with the underlying sentiment, because what we've got is this first-order problem of the state. The state isn't working, civil servants aren't working, we haven't figured out how to organise power. So all the things we all care about, you know, stopping mass immigration, controlling the borders, fixing the NHS, they're second-order problems. The first-order problem is the state, so I agree this is an issue. But where I struggle with Pat McFadden and this government is they've just spent the last 6 months basically prioritising the public sector over private sector wealth creators and entrepreneurs and big tech and snubbing Elon Musk and, you know, raising taxes and introducing regulation and raising wages in the public sector. And now they're saying, oh, guys in the private sector, can you help us fix these problems? So why would they now fall over themselves saying, well, we'll help you create a UK Department of Government Efficiency. We'll chip in. Why not? I just think what we need in this country is a business-friendly government that understands entrepreneurship, wealth creation, prosperity, actually requires you to support the private sector by bringing taxes down, by bringing regulation down, by reducing the size of the state and by letting companies actually flourish.
So this is one of the things they want to do is they want to leverage artificial intelligence. And you might have seen in the papers today there was a poll and it was about just under half of workers actually worry that artificial intelligence is going to take their jobs away. So I know a lot of people get a bit anxious about stuff like this. A couple of early pilots, so they're going to start in January. For example, in Essex and Liverpool, they'll be looking at the delivery of temporary accommodation to homeless things. Then you're going to be expanding this up to help the government hit new milestones, including ending hospital backlogs and improving neighbourhood policing. I've got to say, right, I quite like the idea of involving entrepreneurs and business people in the way that government operates. So I've got a listening ear to this. I'm optimistic.
Well, yeah, so am I. I mean, the eating, the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. We'll see if it isn't just all talk. You know, it's 5 years since Weirdos and Misfits were invited into government by Dominic Cummings, but I'm not sure that any of us have seen a big sort of change to a tech start-up style of government under the last lot. And so let's see if this lot can manage it. I mean, look, I think we get frustrated with how old school many government services are. For example, I was talking to somebody the other day who had a hospital appointment. They got the letter inviting them to it 3 days after the appointment because it was sent as a letter, you know, in the, I hate using that phrase, but snail mail, as it were. They then tried to ring, and of course they couldn't get through because the phone line's only open for an hour a day. They couldn't go online to change it like we do with, you know, changing a hair appointment or something, which we can now do online. So, I mean, yes to technology, but no to thinking this is going to save everything. But I'd say that Matt says that the government's prioritised the public sector. I think it has. What I think it has done is said it wants to invest in the public sector to deliver the services we all want. But we saw last week in his big speech, Keir Starmer was absolutely clear. The public sector has to change, and this is part of the tools for doing that.
But the interesting thing about that is they gave pay rises to the public sector without demanding the productivity drive, without demanding the internal reforms. We've seen that with the NHS. And also, by the way, you know, we've got people, tech entrepreneurs being asked to come and help. Well, let's fix the biggest problem facing this country, and you know what I'm going to say. It's immigration. Why don't we get some of the big tech guys to figure out how we control our own borders, how we track the people that come into our country and then we don't know where they go?
Well, I think that's...
We don't know where they are.
There's nothing to say...
It's crazy to me that, again, you know, the other thing we learned last week, by the way, is not only they're now interested in these schemes, but we learnt the priorities of the government, didn't we? We had the 5 big priorities, and they talked about public service reform and so on, but they didn't talk at all about the big issue in the room, the elephant in the room, which is how we can just control who comes in and out and how we can count the people coming in and out, because the government can't even do that.
Well, actually, one of the things... There's nothing to say that that helping to deliver tech in government shouldn't involve immigration. Absolutely. And I think the government would want to use tech as part of the migration so that we don't have kind of paper files languishing and getting lost, which is what we've had. When we've had some total chaos in the immigration. So there's no reason that this can't be applied to immigration. He may not have mentioned it in his speech, but he's certainly not being excluded in his new way of doing things.
Is it? That's not a priority.
Yeah, just briefly.
I don't think.
The problem here, though, too, is remember the difference between the UK and the US. The problem isn't only about how the state works. The problem is we can't actually really replace many people in the state. When Donald Trump comes in January, he gets to replace about 20 to 40,000 people, OK? We get, if we have a new government, maybe the ability to replace 100 special advisors at that. If we sack a couple of permanent secretaries like Liz Truss did, everyone in Westminster has a meltdown. We need to actually be able to fully recalibrate the state, which means dumping a lot of people who've been working in the state for decades and haven't been improving it.
Well, actually, I agree with you there. I mean, I think that one of the things that he shouldn't have done last week is bring in the guy who hasn't succeeded at health as his new permanent cabinet secretary.
Jeff's been in touch and says, Michelle, he feels it shows that Labour hasn't got a clue that he says they're asking for help from the very people they're crucifying with the highest taxes in the world. Morag says, I thought there was a lot of business people at Reform UK, so why don't they hand the reins over to them? Don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. And someone else says, Michelle, Labour want us to do their job. It shows how weak they are. But hang on, do you think that about Donald Trump then? When he's asked people like Elon Musk to help him, do you think that shows a weakness in Donald Trump? I don't think so. Carol says, Michelle, this is great. The Labour Party need these thinkers and innovators, and I think she thinks it's great that they're reaching out to them. Keep your thoughts coming in. A really interesting report was released today, ladies and gents. There's so much to discuss within it. Extremism and the threat of that, the amount of division from people left and right in the country, and the lack of trust when it comes to governments, whoever they are. And conspiracy theories, of course, that gets mentioned as well. We'll look at it all in 2.
Evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Clear skies overnight across the north will allow things to turn very frosty. Also some thick fog patches for parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Further south, staying largely dry but quite cloudy. This weather front still generating quite a few showers across the far southeast, parts of Essex, even as far north as Suffolk. Those showers feeding in across Kent, the London area, into parts of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. But away from the southeast, it is generally dry. Clearer skies here. That's where the fog is going to thicken up. Southwest Scotland, also western parts of Northern Ireland. That fog likely to be pretty dense and linger well into tomorrow. For England and Wales, we'll keep a lot of cloud. That'll keep the temperatures generally above freezing. But a wet start for parts of the southeast. Still a few showers coming in, particularly across parts of Kent, feeding all the way down across the Channel Islands too. But elsewhere, generally dry and cloudy for England and Wales. Some frost across Cumbria and certainly further north and west across Scotland and Northern Ireland. The frost widespread and some dense patches of fog. Parts of the central belt, particularly to the west, southwest Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. And where that fog forms through the night, it could be very slow to clear tomorrow. Quite a lot of cloud across the far north. Some drizzly rain heading its way towards Shetland. The showers in the southeast, well, still a few feeding in, but tending to fizzle out generally through the day. Some breaks in the cloud for North Wales, northwest England. Bit of sunshine possible here. Temperatures 6 or 7 Celsius. Still feeling cold with that wind coming in from the North Sea across the southeast. That's still there on Wednesday, as is the possibility of the odd shower across the south. Fog again for parts of southern Scotland and Northern Ireland, and again it could last all day. If it does, temperatures will struggle to get above freezing, but away from the fog, much of Scotland, Northern Ireland having another sunny day on Wednesday. Most of England and Wales staying fairly cloudy. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening to you, I'm Johnny Ratner. Problems in West Yorkshire on the M1. The inside lane on that 4-lane stretch is coned off southbound from junction 41 to 40 near Wakefield, where a lorry's broken down. Recovery works underway. Queues back towards the M621, back towards Leeds. The M42 in Worcestershire is currently being held northbound from junction 1 at Bromsgrove to 2 at the Alvechurch exit. A police investigation is underway. Long queues back to the M5. In Essex on the M11, the motorway's down to a single lane southbound just before junction 7, just north of Harlow. Recovery works underway after a van caught fire. In Berkshire on the M4, everyone's been funneled into the inside lane on that 3-lane stretch, London bound. For emergency repair works at junction 5 at Langley, queues back to Slough. And also in Berkshire and Ascot, the A332 Swinley Road, that's closed at the scene of a 2-vehicle collision. And that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. If you're just joining us, good evening to you. Alongside me, my panel. The M&M's Matt Goodwin, the pollster and academic, and Matt Larser, the former Labour advisor. We've been talking about this kind of a rally call, if you like, to get start-up entrepreneurs, creative minds to come and join the government. One of my viewers has got in touch saying, Michelle, you've got to just think back to how much we spent on track and trace. He says, my IT team and I could have worked out that was essentially impossible and flawed within a week, he says. Lots of people are quite interested by that idea. Anyway, look, there's so much more we need to discuss. A report out today. This is a report that was led by the former Counter-Extremism Commissioner. It's urged a radical rethink of how ministers are tackling rising extremism. I've got to say, right, when you look at the way that these kind of reports are indeed kind of referenced and reported on, I couldn't help but notice Nigel Farage, for example. His face was slapped alongside some of this stuff in the media headlines today, apparently, looking at things like inflammatory language and fueling conspiracy theories. I find this so interesting. There's so many strands to unpick, Matt Goodwin. It talks about how the UK is almost as divided between the left and right as America. Polarisation and so on. Where do you want to begin with this?
Well, I don't think, it's true that we're a divided country. I don't think anybody would dispute that. I think that's pretty clear, and we've seen that division around things like the marches and the protests after the 7th of October, and we've seen it over some of these big issues. Where I struggle with these reports is, firstly, presenting, as The Guardian did today, I think we've got the image of it, a headline about the report with a picture of Nigel Farage, a democratically elected member of Parliament, being included by, a left-wing newspaper, implying that he is somehow associated with extremism. And so many of these reports, including this one, by the way, which draws on polling and survey work by Hope Not Hate, which is a left-wing organisation affiliated with the Labour Party, we have to be aware of the fact that some of these reports are not independent and neutral. The second thing I would say here, which is a little bugbear of mine, is these reports often ignore, again, the elephant in the room as to why so many people are feeling so insecure, and they then wrap this all up as a conspiracy theory. And one of the things this report does not mention at all are those two little words, mass immigration. It might make people in this country feel insecure, worried about their borders when we've got nearly 1 million people coming in net migration and we've got basically 150,000 illegal migrants. I haven't seen anything in the coverage today about the underlying causes as to why people feel disillusioned. What I've seen instead is a lot of talk about conspiracy theories and discussion about inflammatory language. But actually, if you look at what, say, Nigel Farage has been saying around issues around migration, I don't think that's inflammatory. I think he's simply saying that we need to control this issue before it gets out of hand and it causes real division. If anything's extreme in this country, Matt might disagree with me, but I think the policy of mass immigration is extreme.
Well, I think I partly agree with you, and I think that these reports can be simplistic. I think it may well have coming from a particular place and have a particular agenda, and I think we have to recognise why people feel insecure. I mean, that's a basic, left of centre belief is to look at insecurity. I mean, that's why the Labour Party was formed, out of people's insecurity. Things like the cooperative movement were started. I think politicians, elected or not, need to be careful with their language, and it needs to not be inflammatory. But I think that, we in the report, 55% of young men in the UK have a positive view of Andrew Tate. Now, I mean, you can just criticise that, you can try and understand that.
Yeah.
So I think it's condemn a little less and understand a little more.
Matt, I would say, why do they have a positive view of Andrew Tate? What these reports do a very good job at doing is they ignore, for example, how much of the elite class has embraced toxic masculinity, telling men that there's something fundamentally wrong about being a man, and then being surprised at them expressing sympathy for, somebody like Andrew Tate, who I don't personally agree with, but I can see why he appeals to young men. The other thing here is, listen to this, 1 in 10 people share the views of or sympathise with those who engaged in violent disorder, rioting and the protests during the summer after Southport. Now, I'm sorry to be, again, controversial, but I think there are millions of people, actually, who would have looked at the protests and said, you know what, I don't agree with violence and criminality, but I do think these people are concerned about broken borders, they're concerned about some issues like the rise of radical Islamism in our society, they're worried about terrorism and so on. But again, here, all of that is wrapped up under the sort of headline of this is problematic, these people are wrong, we should fix this, without actually talking about the underlying issues. And that is where I start to depart from the counter-extremism industry. And I'll be frank, Matt, I used to work in this industry. You know, I know a lot of people in this industry. It is a politicised industry. It's dominated by...
The report does acknowledge that the Prevent programme isn't a fit for purpose. That's the government's kind of counter-extremism, counter-radicalisation programme. It says that it needs radical change, and it needs to be much more focused on the things it can actually do.
I'll give you one example around Prevent. So maybe, I don't know if you agree with this, but we routinely are told by politicians that the threat from violent radical Islamism and the far right is comparable, and they're often presented as being the same. But if you look at Prevent data, if you look at the arrest data on people who are actually brought into the legal system because of concerns over extremism, it's not even close. Radical violent Islamists are overwhelmingly more likely to be dealt with by the police, by the judicial system. Yet our conversation presents them as being comparable. And I think this, again, partly reflects the way in which this agenda has been, I don't want to say hijacked, but let's say it leans in a particular political direction.
I agree with you. That of course, we must be wary of all threats, but clearly radical Islamism is the biggest of threat there is out there. And we shouldn't be afraid of saying so, because in order to protect all communities, we need to acknowledge what the real threats are. So I agree with you that, you know, although we need to keep radical right violence, we've seen acts of that, we need to keep things in proportion and keep them in balance. But we need a Prevent programme that actually works. So I agree that that change is needed.
But Michelle, can I just give you one quick example? Sorry, there's another thing here that it says, because I'm on a roll here. It refers to the role of elected figures using inflammatory language or extremist rhetoric or engaging in culture wars. Now, what they mean by culture wars, let's be clear, they mean things like sticking up for women's rights and the rights of our children, saying, actually, I don't believe that a little boy can become a little girl and a little girl can become a little boy. But if I were to say that, I'm engaging in culture wars, therefore I'm seen as a would-be extremist. Some of the people who they've pointed to, writers, friends of mine, people like Douglas Murray, have been held up in Prevent literature as a problem simply for asking questions around immigration and its effects. We had a counter-radicalisation course at a university recently that was holding up mainstream writers and thinkers as being somehow providing a sort of stepping stone into extremism. And this never happens on the left. It always happens on the right, Matt.
Well, I think people who've had their communist files for a century and who were barred from being on the BBC, you used to have a Christmas tree on your file if the MI5 didn't like you back in the 60s and 70s.
I don't see Jeremy Corbyn on here.
No, look, hang on. But I agree with you that was wrong then, and this is wrong. This
Owen
is wrong
Jones
now.
on
I
here.
shouldn't have. People shouldn't be holding up mainstream literature, for mainstream thinkers as in anti-extremism seminars, and that's very worrying. Nor should they be holding up Owen Jones or Douglas Murray, because both are part of a valid debate.
Yeah, and I agree with that. So we both agree on that. But culture wars, we should be able to debate the rights of women.
We shouldn't demonise people.
This again is classic rhetoric of the left, because actually by inclusion, what you mean is excluding legitimate values and beliefs. Culture wars, our history, our identity, the rights of women, the rights of our children, these are all up for debate. The word culture wars, it's just so... It's a very deliberate attempt to shut down views that the elite class disagree with.
Well, isn't the use of the term woke an attempt on the other way to shut down views that people don't like? I mean, I think, there are legitimate issues to be discussed, as an example around the trans issue, but, I think everything isn't a culture war, and we shouldn't reduce everything. We shouldn't... I don't think that that's the most important issue in our society. I think sometimes they're used as wedge issues, as the political strategies cause them, to try and divide people.
Well,
when you just referenced then the culture war, and then you said as example the trans issue, and then you talk about demonising people, do you believe that if someone believes in reality and fact and strongly believes that a man cannot become a woman, full stop, that is somehow demonising an individual?
No, I think if people are having a reasonable debate where they're making those points, then I think that's perfectly legitimate for making those points, and they shouldn't be cancelled. People like Kathleen Stock and other people who were piled on, but their voices should be heard as part of a discussion on that issue. But I think it needs to be a discussion that doesn't demonise individuals, that doesn't, we've seen in America with.
But you're already putting parameters around it.
Well, because I think there's a way of behaving to individuals. So the Congress congresswoman in the States who, you know, actually has been made a big issue of which bathroom she uses. She's quite rightly said it's not about me and which bathroom I use, it's about the people who've elected me to represent them. So I think that's actually the sort of position that people should take, that they shouldn't allow sort of demonisation of individuals to get in the way of a legitimate discussion about the wider issue.
If just briefly, if we want to reduce extremism in the UK and polarisation and division, if we want to reduce all of those things, I've got a wacky idea. Call me insane. How about we create a national conversation on the politics in this country that doesn't only serve the 10% of the elite class in Oxford, Cambridge, Brighton and London, and we create a national conversation on the politics that serves the 80-90% of people
that national conversation?
who look at things.
You're not cancelled. You're here to give you.
No, it's not about being cancelled. Who look at things like mass immigration, broken borders, woke ideology, what we're teaching our kids, and they say this is insane.
But I don't know what you mean by woke ideology. I agree with you on migration.
Well,
Migration's got out of control.
The intelligence services this week deciding that they won't open an internship programme for white British children. I would say that's pretty extreme.
Well, there you go, because I'm going to debate that after the break. You've teed it up for me quite nicely. What do you think of some of what you've just been hearing there? Ladies and gents, get in touch all the usual ways. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email. You are part of this conversation, so tell me what you think. And after the break, let's pick up on that then. What do you think then about this internship? I can tell you now, Rupert Lowe, a Reform UK MP, he's called it essentially state-sponsored racism. What do you think?
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Joining me now is food historian and author of Christmas with Dickens, Pen Vogler. Pen, let's start with Christmas Carol. Did A Christmas Carol change Britain's view of Christmas?
I think it did, enormously. Before then, people were beginning to think, as they do now, that Christmas might be being a little bit commercial. It was too much food and drink, not enough kind of seriousness or not enough kind of love and family. And what Dickens did with A Christmas Carol was show people who were coming to the cities, who were kind of losing their rural history, a new way of celebrating Christmas, that a real, just a family could get together and love and kind of get around the table together. And whereas before, a lot of those kind of Christmas dishes would have been seasonal, lots of people would have eaten them at different times of the year, Dickens does two things. He takes the goose, which is what the Cratchits are going to eat, and he turns it to a turkey, much bigger, meatier, kind of more generous. And then he takes this thing that he never calls Christmas pudding in A Christmas Carol. There's no Christmas pudding. He only calls it plum pudding, and he anchors it to that day. And interestingly, after then, people start publishing recipes for Christmas pudding, and it starts getting its name, Christmas pudding, from plum pudding. And I think all of that really comes from A Christmas Carol.
You say becomes a Christmas pudding almost immediately after A Christmas Carol is published?
Yes, I mean, it's occasionally called Christmas pudding before, but not often. And then a very famous for the time, the kind of Delia Smith of her day, lady called Eliza Acton, publishes a recipe called The Author's Christmas Pudding in 1845. And we know she's a big Dickens fan because she sent a copy of her cookbook to him.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry, Matt Laza and Matt Goodwin alongside you till 7 o'clock. There's a lot of people getting in touch about that one. Yol says, Michelle, why is it always just politicians on the right that are accused of inflammatory language? He says he can point to a variety of, for example, Labour MPs that he feels fit that bill as well. Stuart said, has there been any politician that's been more inflammatory recently than Keir Starmer when he labelled Brits as far right if they had the audacity to be concerned about immigration? Lee, you echo that same kind of sentiment as well. Carol says, Michelle, why are politicians so surprised about so-called extremism in this country? She feels it's government policy that pushes people in that direction. And Yol, you mentioned about politicians on the right being accused of inflammatory things. Do you remember those people, the riots in the summer? They were called #Farage riots. Do you remember that? I personally thought that was absolutely appalling. Anyway, look, Matt Goodwin teed up a story for me. It's almost like you know what you're doing, Matt. He teed up a story
I'm
for
a GB
me
pro.
before the break, and it's all about the security services now. A summer internship has been advertised. This is at MI5, MI6, GCHQ, those kind of things. And if you're sitting there thinking, that's me, Michelle, I could be James Bond, hold on a second, because there's a couple of catches. It's open for Black, Asian, mixed heritage or ethnic minority people, or for those from socially and economically disadvantaged backgrounds. Rupert Lowe has called this essentially state-sanctioned racism. What do you think, Matt Goodwin?
Of course it's racism. It's anti-white racism. When an institution is discriminating against people on the basis of their race and ethnicity, it's clearly racial discrimination. And what this is really showing us, what it's a symbol of, and this is important, is what lies at the heart of this woke mind virus that's taken over the public sector institutions, because it's important. It's what my friend Professor Eric Kaufman, he's writing a brilliant book on woke ideology. He says it's the anti-majority, pro-minority impulse. That's what is at the heart of the woke mind virus. You think badly about the majority and you think only good things about racial, sexual, gender minorities. And that is basically the impulse that drives the whole thing. So white British kids, bad. Black British kids, good. Straight white men, bad. You know, LGBTQ plus DTPCZ, good. And the point is...
I think you missed a few letters off
the point is, though, in all seriousness, our institutions have been politicised. They've been politicised. They're openly biased. We need to reform these institutions. This is the security services, for goodness sake. Security services doing this. They're supposed to represent us and defend us.
You've got a slightly different
I do. So look, if this was for all recruitment to security services, I would be sharing your outrage, Matt. But it's not. It's for one specific programme. We all know how MI5 and MI6 used to recruit, because we've all seen those TV shows and films where people, you know, at posh universities used to go up and say, "Would you like to come to London for a meeting, old chap?" You know, and you know, a secret meeting, a special meeting, and then that's how, you know, all those spies, including all those who betrayed our country, the Cambridge spies, etc., were recruited. Where are the biggest threats? You said it yourself tonight, Matt. The biggest threat to our country is radical Islamism. I'd rather we were recruiting people to the security services who come from communities in Bradford and Birmingham and East London who speak the language and understand those communities, you know, have a sense of those communities. But of course we want to have those as part of recruitment from a whole range of places. If it's one scheme, you have to actually, to be able to do this, you have to get dispensation from the Equalities Act. There has to be a reasonable justification. If it helps us ensure that we have the right people to defend us, I'm in favour of it. The security services will still be recruiting straight white men, believe you me.
Matt, let me just be clear about one thing. There is a principle that should run through all of our institutions, and that principle is meritocracy. It should be the most capable and competent people who should get the job, not those who are chosen on the basis of their identities and their fixed characteristics. You and I both know this is not just one programme. We've had universities recently, Northumbria, I put it on X, they've had a PhD programme which is only open to people of mixed, black, etc. heritage, not open to white British kids. I can go through a number of other institutions in this country where white British kids are basically told de facto, like the school in London, where white British kids weren't allowed to attend extra teaching on Sundays because it was reserved for black British kids. We have institutions that have been corrupted by an ideology. An ideology that is un-British. It's not right, Matt, that we're doing this. And ultimately, if you want to solve extremism, as we just discussed in the previous segment in this report, well, you should root out this un-British, divisive ideology from our schools, our universities. I want all the diversity nonsense ripped out of public sector institutions.
Look, it's about balance. It's I mean, going through the examples that you say. Should there be a women's prize for fiction? And yeah, that's perfectly legitimate if people want to organise that. Should there be bursaries targeted at particular people? We've long had people have left money in their wills to help Welsh students at Oxford. Should that be allowed? Yes, that shouldn't be outlawed. Matt. But let me finish, Matt. But what should be installed is common sense. So I think you're absolutely right. Look, we know at the moment that the worst performance in our schools is from white boys, particularly those from places like coastal communities, around the country, especially on the East Coast. Should we have targeted support for them? Yes. So it's about common sense. But, of course, nobody being told that because you're white British, you're wrong, any more than for years people were told they were less valuable because they weren't white British.
On that specific issue, there was a bit of research that looked at targets for kids from the white British majority by a think tank called Neon, and they found that only 1 in 5 universities were providing additional support to kids from white British communities. At the same time, as universities, and you know this well, Cambridge, Oxford and Russell Group, elite universities, have been falling over themselves to do exactly what I said earlier on, which is help minorities, but basically don't put the same effort into helping the majority.
I worked at the BBC for a long time, and in fact, one of the products of this now has his own show in America on millions of dollars a year. But I had a boss who, when he got the CVs, you got 2 points. You got 1 for being to Oxbridge and 1 for being from ethnic minority. This is in his unofficial way of doing it. And if you went to Oxbridge and were an ethnic minority, then you were a winner. So when it came to a discussion of all our BBC colleagues were called in for an equality thing, and we were told, what do you think the number one thing is? Not just to keep recruiting public school kids who happen to be from an ethnic minority. Yeah. So absolutely, I agree it's about balance. Universities shouldn't just be looking to tick boxes. They should be looking to look at people who are underrepresented, and that may well now be white British communities and white British boys. So I think we actually agree. This is the way of doing it.
No, just because I'm saying root out all the identity politics nonsense from our public sector institutions. That's what I'm saying.
What I'm saying is, God help anyone that's white that wants a job in TV adverts. Have you seen these? Have you seen TV adverts recently, ladies and gents? Goodness gracious me, not much diversity in those, is there? Anyway, I take myself off on a different tangent. Let me bring it back to GCHQ. We've got a statement from them that says the summer intelligence internship is a lawful measure used by the intelligence agencies to encourage people from underrepresented groups to consider careers within our organisations. Anyone who's participated in the internship and who wishes to apply for a permanent position can do so. They'll compete against all other candidates in external recruitment processes. So there you go then. Adrian, on Twitter, you've got in touch and you've said you found your new news channel. Well, welcome aboard, Adrian. It's very nice to have you indeed. Lots of people getting in touch about that extremism conversation. Debbie, also on Twitter, says, Michelle, it seems to me that anyone who doesn't agree with a left-wing agenda or left-wing ideology seems to be classed easily as an extremist these days. Deborah, I hear you on that one, but look, that's all we've got time for. It flies by, doesn't it? Thanks once again to my M&Ms, Matt Larser and Matt Goodwin. You have yourselves a fantastic evening at home, everybody. I will see you tomorrow. Night-night.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Clear skies overnight across the north will allow things to turn very frosty. Also some thick fog patches for parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Further south, staying largely dry but quite cloudy. This weather front still generating quite a few showers across the far southeast, parts of Essex, even as far north as Suffolk. Those showers feeding in across Kent, the London area, into parts of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. But away from the southeast, it is generally dry. Clearer skies here. That's where the fog is going to thicken up. Southwest Scotland, also western parts of Northern Ireland. That fog likely to be pretty dense and linger well into tomorrow. For England and Wales, we'll keep a lot of cloud. That'll keep the temperatures generally above freezing. But a wet start for parts of the southeast. Still a few showers coming in, particularly across parts of Kent, feeding all the way down across the Channel Islands too. But elsewhere, generally dry and cloudy for England and Wales. Some frost across Cumbria and certainly further north and west across Scotland and Northern Ireland. The frost widespread and some dense patches of fog. Parts of the central belt, particularly to the west, southwest Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. And where that fog forms through the night, it could be very slow to clear tomorrow. Quite a lot of cloud across the far north. Some drizzly rain heading its way towards Shetland. The showers in the southeast, well, still a few feeding in, but tending to fizzle out generally through the day. Some breaks in the cloud for North Wales, northwest England. Better sunshine possible here. Temperatures 6 or 7 Celsius. Still feeling cold with that wind coming in from the North Sea across the southeast. That's still there on Wednesday, as is the possibility of the odd shower across the south. Fog again for parts of southern Scotland and Northern Ireland, and again it could last all day. If it does, temperatures will struggle to get above freezing, but away from the fog, much of Scotland, Northern Ireland having another sunny day on Wednesday. Most of England and Wales staying fairly cloudy. Bye for now.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems continue in West Yorkshire on the M1 northbound. One lane's closed from junction 41 to 42 towards the M62 towards the Lofthouse interchange, of course, at the scene of an accident involving a couple of lorries. In Worcestershire, there are long queues on the M42 northbound towards junction 1, the A38 Bromsgrove exit after an earlier police investigation closed the motorway. However, all restrictions have now been lifted. And in Essex, the M11 down to a single lane on that 3-lane stretch southbound just before junction 7 north of Harlow. Emergency repair works are underway after a van caught fire this morning. On the Essex stretch of the M25, the two inside lanes of 4 are closed anti-clockwise just after the M11 interchange for emergency repair works. And finally, on the M5 in Devon, the northbound exit is closed at junction 29 at Exeter, where a car's broken down. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's our festive treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £50,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest ever Great British giveaway. What would you spend £50,000 on in the coming year? Spectacular holidays, a brand new car, home improvements, or maybe you'd just like to save it for a special occasion. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
A very, very good evening to you. It's 7 p.m. and I'm Martin Daubney, standing in for the big man, Nigel Farage. On tonight's Farage Show, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has tonight announced that Syrians seeking asylum in Britain